My name is Grace Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and on what should have been the happiest day of my life, my father stood in front of 150 wedding guests, grabbed a microphone, and called me a gold digger. "Just like my mother," he said. His voice echoed through the reception hall. The entire room went silent. You could hear the clink of champagne glasses being set down on tables. You could hear people shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. My mother's hand started trembling at table 3. My grandmother gripped the edge of her seat so hard her knuckles turned white. And my brand new husband? He stood frozen next to our wedding cake, completely paralyzed. But me, the bride, standing there in my white dress? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. Instead, I walked calmly to the DJ booth. I smiled at the sound engineer, and I pressed play on a recording that had been sitting in my phone for 11 months. What came out of those speakers changed absolutely everything. My father's face drained of all color. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. And then a man from table 6 stood up, adjusted his suit jacket, picked up a manila envelope, and started walking toward my father with the kind of purpose that makes a room hold its breath. That was 3 hours into my wedding reception. But this story, it actually starts 14 years earlier on a Tuesday night when I was just 14 years old, and my mother told me to pack a bag because we were leaving. My father thought he was exposing me that night at my wedding. What he didn't know is that I'd been waiting for him to try. Let me take you back to the night everything changed, the night my childhood ended in the hallway of a house I'd never see again. I was 14 when my mother left my father. She didn't warn me it was coming. There were no family meetings, no tearful explanations. She just walked into my bedroom at 9:30 on a random Tuesday evening, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from her shift, and said 4 words that rewired my entire life. "Pack what you need. We're going." I grabbed my backpack, I threw in some textbooks, a toothbrush, my phone charger, the essentials of a teenage life. I didn't think to take the family photos hanging in the hallway. I didn't know those memories were about to become artifacts from a different life. I didn't know I'd never walk through that front door again. My father stood at the top of the stairs with his arms crossed. He didn't try to stop us. He didn't ask where we were going. He didn't demand answers or explanations. He just looked at my mother, then looked at me, and said 5 words I can still hear in my head 14 years later. "Go ahead, take the ungrateful one with you." The ungrateful one. That's what he called me, his daughter. I was 14 years old. I'd made honor roll that semester. I cleaned the kitchen every Sunday without being asked. I did everything right. But I was standing next to my mother in that moment, and in my father's world, that made me the enemy. My mother drove in complete silence. I sat in the passenger seat holding my backpack on my lap, watching streetlights blur past the window. I didn't cry. I think I was too confused, too shocked to process what was actually happening. Within a week, my father made his move. He called every single relative on his side of the family, aunts, uncles, cousins, people I'd known my entire life, and he told a story, a simple, effective lie. "Karen left because she found someone else. She's been lying to me for years." That was completely false. My mother hadn't found another man. There was no affair, no betrayal, no secret romance, but my father said it with such wounded conviction, playing the role of the betrayed husband so perfectly that people believed him. The church believed him. His golf buddies believed him. Even my grandmother on his side, who'd known my mother for 16 years, believed him. And here's the thing that still hurts the most. Nobody called to ask me what happened. Nobody wanted my side of the story. I was 14 years old, and I'd already become invisible. My father didn't call me for 6 months. When I finally broke down and called him, desperate to hear his voice, he picked up on the third ring. His tone was flat, bored almost. "If you're calling to ask for money, you're just like her." I hung up. I sat on the edge of my mother's rented bed in our new apartment because I didn't have my own room yet, and I just stared at the wall. But here's what I didn't know, what nobody knew. The real reason my mother left wouldn't come out for years, not until 11 months before my wedding, and when I finally learned the truth. Unpause. Everything made sense. What my father did at my wedding wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. But what he didn't realize is that I'd been preparing for that moment for over a decade. That recording I played, the man from Table 6, they were just pieces of a plan I didn't even know I was building. But before I tell you what happened at that reception, you need to understand what happened in the years between. You need to see what my mother and I survived, because the truth about gold diggers, it's never what people think.
My mother worked the night shift at St. David's Memorial Hospital. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 14 if they were short-staffed. She'd come home at 6 in the morning, make me toast, check my homework with exhausted eyes, and then collapse on the couch still wearing her scrubs because she was too tired to even change. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment off Route 9, the kind of place where the carpet is permanently beige and mysteriously stained, where the kitchen faucet drips no matter how many times you tighten it, where the walls are so thin you can hear your neighbor's television through the bedroom wall. My mother took the bedroom. I slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room. I did my homework at the kitchen counter because we didn't own a desk. There was no home office, no study nook, no cozy reading corner, just a Formica counter, a wobbly bar stool, and whatever light I could get from the overhead fixture. Meanwhile, my father lived in the 4-bedroom house that his mother, my grandmother on his side, had left him when she passed. Big yard, quiet street, the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their porches and know each other's dogs by name, the kind of place where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. The house I grew up in, the house I'd never see again. During the divorce proceedings, my father did something that I wouldn't fully understand until years later. He told the court his income was lower than it actually was. He manipulated the numbers, hid assets, played the system like he'd been planning it all along. My mother's lawyer was a legal aid attorney juggling 40 different cases at once. He was a good man doing his absolute best with limited resources and no time, but he was outmatched. My father had money for a better lawyer. My father had time to prepare. My father had a strategy. The judge signed off on a settlement that gave my mother $40,000. Let that number sit. $40,000 for 14 years of marriage, 14 years of putting her nursing career on hold to raise me while my father built his real estate business, 14 years of being a wife, a mother, a partner. One check, $40,000. She never told me that number. I found out years later, and when I did, I felt physically sick. $40,000 for a woman who'd sacrificed her career, her independence, her identity for over a decade. My grandmother, my mother's mother, Maggie Brooks, helped when she could. She'd drive over with groceries in her trunk. She'd slip a $20 bill into my coat pocket when she thought I wasn't looking. But she lived on a fixed income herself, Social Security and a small pension from the school district where she'd worked as a secretary for 31 years. She couldn't save us. She could only help us survive. At school, the rumors had already started spreading like poison. One day at lunch, a girl in my English class, someone I barely knew, looked at me across the cafeteria table and asked with this casual cruelty that only teenagers can manage, "Didn't your dad say your mom is a homewrecker?" The rumor had traveled from my father's church circle to the school parking lot in under a month. His version of the story had become the official narrative. My mother was the villain. My mother was the liar. My mother was the one who destroyed our family. I finished eating my sandwich in a bathroom stall. I kept my grades up because I didn't have a choice anymore. Scholarships weren't just a goal, they were my only way out, my only path to a future that wasn't defined by that one-bedroom apartment and my mother's exhausted eyes. I studied during lunch periods, I stayed late for tutoring, I volunteered for every extra credit opportunity, and when the acceptance letter came, full ride to State University, my mother held that piece of paper in both hands and cried, harder than the night we left. My father didn't know I'd been accepted. I didn't tell him. He never asked. My grandmother, Maggie, told me something once, sitting at her small kitchen table with sunlight coming through the window. She was drinking tea from a chipped mug, and she looked at me with those wise, tired eyes and said, "Your mother didn't leave because she's weak, sweetheart. She left because she's brave." I wanted to believe that. It took me a long time to actually feel it in my bones, but she was right. I graduated summa cum laude, full scholarship, zero debt. I became an English teacher at a public high school 20 minutes from my mother's apartment. The pay wasn't glamorous, $46,000 a year before taxes, but it was mine. Every single dollar was earned by me, controlled by me, spent by my own choices. I graded papers at night. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I bought my groceries at Aldi and packed my lunches in Tupperware containers. And I tried not to think about my father living in that big house, probably hosting dinner parties, probably telling people his version of why his ungrateful daughter doesn't speak to him anymore. But here's the thing about trauma, about being called ungrateful when you're 14, about watching your mother work herself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over your head. You don't forget. You can't forget. And somewhere deep inside, whether you admit it or not, you start waiting for the moment that the truth gets its turn to speak. I met Daniel Reed at a community fundraiser for the school district. He was there representing his law firm, one of those pro bono charity events where lawyers donate their time to look good and occasionally actually help people. I was there selling raffle tickets and trying to convince local businesses to donate to our classroom supply fund. He bought $20 worth of raffle tickets. He didn't win anything, but he asked for my number anyway. I thought he was too polished, too put together for someone like me, but then we went to dinner, and he told me about growing up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs. He told me about paying his way through law school. He told me about the year he lived in his car while studying for the bar exam. He wasn't what I expected. He was real. 2 years later, he proposed. Nothing fancy, just the 2 of us in my tiny apartment with takeout Chinese food and a ring he'd been saving for 6 months to afford. I said yes before he even finished the question. And that's when I had to make a decision I'd been avoiding for 14 years. Do I invite my father to the wedding? My mother said it was my choice. Daniel said he'd support whatever I decided. But my grandmother Maggie, sitting in her same kitchen chair, drinking from the same chipped mug, said something that changed my perspective. Grace, baby, sometimes people need to be given enough rope to show you exactly who they are. Maybe it's time to let him. I sent the invitation. I didn't call him. I didn't write a personal note. I just sent a formal wedding invitation to his address and waited. He RSVP'd yes, +1, his new girlfriend apparently, someone I'd never met and whose name I didn't recognize. And that's when I knew, deep in my gut, I knew he was going to do something public, something meant to humiliate me on the day I was supposed to be happiest. So I did something he would never expect from his ungrateful daughter, something he said 11 months earlier, something he thought nobody else would ever hear. But somebody did hear it. Somebody recorded it. And that recording was about to turn my wedding reception into the reckoning my father never saw coming. 11 months before my wedding, I drove to my father's house for the first time in 6 years. He'd called me out of nowhere on a Wednesday afternoon, not to apologize, not to reconnect. He called because he wanted something. He was refinancing the house, the one his mother left him, and apparently there was some paperwork that required my signature because technically I was still listed as a dependent on some old documents from before the divorce was finalized. I should have said no. I should have told him to mail the papers, but something in me, that 14-year-old girl who still remembered what it felt like to be called ungrateful, wanted to see him, wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, Time had changed him. I was wrong. I pulled into the driveway of that big house, the one with the yard where I used to play, and my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Daniel offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to do this alone. He understood. He always understood. My father opened the door before I could even knock. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were the same, cold, evaluating, like he was sizing up an opponent instead of greeting his daughter. "Grace," he said, "not honey, not sweetheart, just my name, flat and transactional." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to eat dinner as a family. He pushed a stack of papers across to me with a pen. No small talk, no, "How have you been?" Just business. I signed where he pointed. My hand was steady, even though my heart was racing. And then, because I couldn't help myself, because that little girl inside me still needed to know, I asked him, "Dad, do you ever think about reaching out to Mom, just to talk?" The look he gave me, I'll never forget it. It was like I'd asked him the most ridiculous question in the world. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and laughed. Not a real laugh, a bitter, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "Why would I reach out to a woman who destroyed this family, who turned you against me, who's been living off my money for 14 years? I felt my jaw tighten. "She works as a nurse, Dad. She's not living off anything except her own paycheck." "Please," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "She got $40,000 from the divorce and probably went through it in a year. You think I don't know how this works? Women like your mother, they find a man, bleed him dry, then move on to the next one. It's a pattern." Women like your mother. I should have left right then, but I needed to hear more. I needed to understand how deep his delusion went. "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "Am I like her too?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "I don't know, Grace. You tell me. You're marrying a lawyer, aren't you? Guy from some fancy firm downtown. Convenient timing, don't you think? You spent 14 years barely scraping by with your mother, and suddenly you're engaged to a man who can take care of you." "That's not why I'm marrying Daniel." "Sure it's not." And then he said the words that I would replay over and over for the next 11 months. "You're a gold digger, Grace, just like your mother. It's in your blood. You can pretend all you want, but I see exactly what you're doing." Here's what my father didn't know, what he had no way of knowing. My phone was in my purse. My purse was on the table between us, and my phone had been recording since the moment I sat down. I wasn't planning to record him. I actually started the voice memo app by accident while I was driving, trying to leave myself a reminder about something, and I forgot to turn it off. But when I realized it was still running, when I saw that little red recording dot on my screen, I left it on. I asked him more questions. I let him talk. I let him tell me exactly what he thought of my mother, of me, of the life we built without him. And he talked freely, confidently, because he thought he was safe. He thought this was just a private conversation between a father and his disappointing daughter. He had no idea I was documenting every word. When I left that house, I sat in my car in his driveway for 10 minutes, just breathing. My hands were shaking again, not from nerves, this time from rage, from clarity, from the sudden crystalline understanding that my father would never change. He would never apologize. He would never see me as anything other than an extension of my mother, and my mother as nothing other than a villain in his story. I drove straight to Daniel's apartment. He took one look at my face and pulled me inside. What happened? I played him the recording. Daniel listened to the whole thing without saying a word. 23 minutes of my father's voice, dripping with contempt, calling my mother a gold digger, calling me a gold digger, rewriting 14 years of history to make himself the victim. When it ended, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "Grace, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Your father lied during the divorce, about his income, about his assets, about everything. My firm actually looked into a similar case a few years ago, and your name came up in the research. He's known for this, hiding money, underreporting income, making sure his ex-wives get as little as possible in settlements. It's his playbook." "Ex-wives? Plural?" Daniel nodded. He was married once before your mom, very briefly, in his 20s. Same pattern. Woman leaves, he destroys her reputation, makes sure she gets nothing. It's his playbook. I felt the floor had disappeared beneath me. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wasn't sure it was the same Robert Mitchell until you started talking about the wedding, and I didn't want to hurt you with information that might not even be relevant anymore. But Grace, he paused, choosing his words carefully, if you want to expose him, if you want people to know the truth, I know someone who can help. That someone was Nathan Pierce, a lawyer at Daniel's firm who specialized in family law and financial fraud, a man who'd spent 20 years documenting cases exactly like my mother's, a man who happened to be free on a Saturday evening 6 months from now, the same Saturday as my wedding. I'm not saying you should do this, Daniel said carefully. This is your wedding day. It should be about us, about our future. But if your father does what I think he's going to do, if he tries to humiliate you in front of everyone you love, then maybe it's time someone returned the favor. I looked at Daniel, this man who understood me in ways I didn't even understand myself, and I made a decision. Tell Nathan to wear his best suit, and make sure he's seated at table 6. The next 6 months were a blur, planning a wedding, grading papers, trying to act normal while carrying this secret weight in my chest. I didn't tell my mother, I didn't tell my grandmother, I just kept moving forward, kept smiling, kept pretending everything was fine. My father RSVP'd yes. He was bringing his girlfriend Susan, a woman 20 years younger than him, which felt like its own kind of statement. The day of the wedding arrived. I put on my dress, I did my makeup, I smiled for photos, and the entire time, in the back of my mind, I was counting down to the moment I knew was coming, because my father had a pattern, and patterns, once you recognize them, become predictable. He was going to make a speech, he was going to use my wedding as a stage, and when he did, well, let's just say table 6 was going to become the most important table in that entire reception hall. The wedding ceremony was perfect. I walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing Pachelbel's Canon. My mother cried from the front row. My grandmother Maggie held her hand. Daniel's eyes got misty when he saw me, and for those 20 minutes, standing at that altar, saying our vows, I forgot about everything else. I forgot about the recording on my phone. I forgot about Nathan Pierce sitting at table 6. I forgot about my father sitting 5 rows back with his young girlfriend. For 20 beautiful minutes, it was just me and Daniel and the future we were building together. But then the ceremony ended and the reception began, and reality came crashing back in. The reception hall was beautiful, white linens, soft lighting, centerpieces made of roses and baby's breath. We'd spent months planning every detail, choosing every song, crafting a timeline that would make the evening flow perfectly. 300 guests, family, friends, Daniel's colleagues from the firm, teachers from my school, my mother's friends from the hospital, people who loved us, people who wanted to celebrate with us. And somewhere in that crowd, my father was waiting. Dinner went smoothly. The salads came out, then the entrees. People laughed and talked and clinked their glasses. Daniel and I made the rounds, stopping at each table to thank people for coming, to hug relatives we hadn't seen in years, to take photos and collect well wishes. When we got to table 6, I saw Nathan Pierce for the first time that evening. He looked distinguished in a charcoal gray suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. He stood when we approached, shook Daniel's hand, kissed my cheek. "Congratulations, Grace. Beautiful ceremony," he said warmly. "Thank you for coming," I said, and then, quieter so only he could hear, "Are you ready?" He patted the inside pocket of his suit jacket. "Everything you need is right here. But Grace, you don't have to do this. You can still change your mind." I looked across the reception hall. My father was sitting at table 12, the table I'd purposely placed near the back. He was drinking wine, laughing with Susan, looking completely comfortable, like he belonged here, like he had every right to be celebrating my marriage. "No," I said quietly, "I'm not changing my mind." Nathan nodded once. "Then I'll be waiting for your signal." We moved on to the next table. My face hurt from smiling, my feet hurt from my heels, but I kept going, kept playing the role of the happy bride, because I knew what was coming. The speeches started after dinner. Daniel's best man went first, telling embarrassing stories from law school that made everyone laugh. My maid of honor, my college roommate Rebecca, went next with a sweet speech about watching me fall in love. Then my mother stood up. She wasn't planning to give a speech. We hadn't discussed it, but she stood up anyway, microphone shaking slightly in her hand, and said, "I'm not good at public speaking. Anyone who knows me knows I'd rather work a double shift than stand up in front of this many people, but I need to say something." The room got quiet. "Grace, when you were 14 years old, we left a house and started over with almost nothing. I watched you do homework at a kitchen counter because we couldn't afford a desk. I watched you pack lunches in Tupperware and never complain. I watched you earn a full scholarship and graduate with honors and become the kind of teacher I wish I'd had when I was in school." Her voice cracked. "And now I'm watching you marry a man who sees you the way you deserve to be seen, not for what you can provide, not for what you're worth on paper, but for who you are. That's all I ever wanted for you, baby. And Daniel, thank you for loving my daughter exactly as she is." She sat down. People were crying. I was crying. Daniel was crying. And then my father stood up. I felt it before I saw it, that shift in the room, that collective intake of breath. My mother's face went pale. My grandmother Maggie reached for my mother's hand under the table. My father walked to the front of the room with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He picked up the microphone. He smiled at the crowd. "I know I wasn't on the speech list," he said with a charming laugh, "but I'm the father of the bride, and I think I've earned the right to say a few words about my daughter." Daniel's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed once, a question. I squeezed back, an answer. Let him talk. "Grace has always been determined," my father began. "Even as a little girl, she knew what she wanted and how to get it. She learned that from her mother." A few awkward laughs from people who didn't know our history. "Karen, my ex-wife, she's sitting right over there," he pointed. Every head in the room turned to look at my mother. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Karen taught Grace an important lesson. She taught her that marriage can be strategic." The room was getting uncomfortable now. People were shifting in their seats. Daniel's colleague at table 3 was frowning. My principal from school looked confused. "You see," my father continued, his voice taking on that edge I knew so well, "some women, they see marriage as a partnership, but others, they see it as an opportunity, a transaction. They find a man with resources and they—" "Dad," I called out. My voice was steady. "What are you trying to say?" He looked right at me and smiled. "I'm saying you're a gold digger, Grace, just like your mother. You spent 14 years watching her manipulate the system, watching her play the victim, and now you're doing the same. You found yourself a successful lawyer and you locked him down. Congratulations." 300 people, not a single sound, not a glass clinking, not a chair moving, nothing. My mother was shaking. My grandmother looked like she might have a heart attack. Daniel started to stand up, his face red with anger, but I put my hand on his arm. 17 steps, remember?" I whispered. He looked at me confused. Then he remembered. The night he proposed, I'd made him promise something. If anyone ever tried to humiliate me, tried to break me, he had to let me handle it first. I got 17 steps to stand on my own. Only after that would he step in. I stood up. I walked toward the DJ booth. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The DJ, Marcus, was someone I knew from the school district. I'd briefed him weeks ago. He knew exactly what to do. 7 steps, 8 steps, 9. My father was still holding the microphone, watching me walk, probably thinking I was going to run out of the room in tears, probably already planning his next line, his closing argument in the case against my character. 14 steps, 15 steps, 16, 17. I reached Marcus. I smiled at him, and I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up, "Marcus, remember that file I gave you? The one labeled insurance policy?" He nodded. Play it full volume, now." And that's when my father's voice filled the entire reception hall. The recording I'd made 11 months earlier, 23 minutes of my father calling my mother a gold digger, calling me a gold digger, admitting he hid money during the divorce, bragging about how he destroyed my mother's reputation. But here's what my father didn't know. Nathan Pierce had spent the 11 months doing something incredible. He'd investigated my father's finances. He'd found the hidden accounts, the underreported income, the properties in other people's names, and he'd compiled everything into a legal document that was currently sitting in a manila envelope at table 6, and Nathan was standing up. My father's voice kept playing through the speakers. "Women like your mother, they find a man, bleed him dry, then move on to the next one. It's a pattern." His recorded voice was crystal clear. Every word, every condescending tone, every lie he'd told himself to justify what he'd done. In the reception hall, my father's face had gone from confident to confused to absolutely white. He looked at me, standing by the DJ booth. He looked at the speakers. He looked at the 300 guests who were now hearing exactly who he really was. "You're a gold digger, Grace, just like your mother. It's in your blood." Someone gasped. I think it was Susan, his girlfriend. She stood up from table 12, grabbed her purse, and walked straight out of the reception hall. She didn't look back. Smart woman. My father dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a sharp thud that echoed through the speakers before Marcus cut the sound. But my father's recorded voice kept playing, confessing to everything. "I made sure she got as little as possible in the settlement. 40,000, please. I'm worth 10 times that, but she couldn't prove it." That's when Nathan Pierce stood up. He was 6'2", silver-haired, and carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that made people automatically pay attention. He picked up the manila envelope from his seat at table 6. He adjusted his suit jacket, and he started walking toward my father with the measured pace of someone who'd done this many times before. Every eye in the room followed him. "Robert Mitchell?" Nathan's voice carried across the reception hall without him even trying. My father just stood there, frozen. "My name is Nathan Pierce. I'm a family law attorney with Morrison and Reed and Associates. I've been retained by Karen Mitchell to review the financial settlement of your 2012 divorce." My mother's head snapped up. She hadn't known. I hadn't told her. This was my gift to her, the one she never asked for but always deserved. Nathan continued, his voice calm and professional. "Based on the documentation I've compiled over the past 11 months, including bank records, property deeds, and income statements that somehow weren't disclosed during your divorce proceedings, it appears you committed financial fraud. You underreported your income by approximately $370,000. $370,000. That's what he hid. That's what my mother should have received a portion of. That's why we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment while he kept a 4-bedroom house. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, shocked voices, angry voices. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be all over social media, and my father knew it. "This is ridiculous," my father said, but his voice cracked. "This is my daughter's wedding. You can't—" "I absolutely can," Nathan said smoothly. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document. "This is a motion to reopen your divorce case based on evidence of financial fraud. You'll be served officially on Monday morning, but I thought you might want a preview." He held out the papers. My father didn't take them, so Nathan just set them on the nearest table, right on top of someone's half-eaten wedding cake. "Your daughter was kind enough to provide a recording that corroborates the financial discrepancies. In it, you admit to hiding assets, you admit to manipulating the settlement, and you admit to deliberately destroying your ex-wife's reputation with false allegations of infidelity." Nathan turned to face the room, addressing everyone now. "For those of you who heard Robert's version of events 14 years ago, who believed he was the victim in his divorce, I want you to know the truth. Karen Mitchell never cheated. She never lied. She left an emotionally abusive marriage with a 14-year-old daughter and $40,000. Meanwhile, Robert kept a house worth $400,000, rental properties worth another $600,000, and a business valued at over $1 million. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shocked voices, angry voices. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be all over social media, and my father knew it. "This is ridiculous," my father said, but his voice cracked. "This is my daughter's wedding. You can't—" "I absolutely can," Nathan said smoothly. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document. "This is a motion to reopen your divorce case based on evidence of financial fraud. You'll be served officially on Monday morning, but I thought you might want a preview." He held out the papers. My father didn't take them, so Nathan just set them on the nearest table, right on top of someone's half-eaten wedding cake. "Your daughter was kind enough to provide a recording that corroborates the financial discrepancies. In it, you admit to hiding assets, you admit to manipulating the settlement, and you admit to deliberately destroying your ex-wife's reputation with false allegations of infidelity." Nathan turned to face the room, addressing everyone now. "For those of you who heard Robert's version of events 14 years ago, who believed he was the victim in his divorce, I want you to know the truth. Karen Mitchell never cheated. She never lied. She left an emotionally abusive marriage with a 14-year-old daughter and $40,000. Meanwhile, Robert kept a house worth $400,000, rental properties worth another $600,000, and a business valued at over $1 million. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shocked voices, angry voices. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be all over social media, and my father knew it. "This is ridiculous," my father said, but his voice cracked. "This is my daughter's wedding. You can't—" "I absolutely can," Nathan said smoothly. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document. "This is a motion to reopen your divorce case based on evidence of financial fraud. You'll be served officially on Monday morning, but I thought you might want a preview." He held out the papers. My father didn't take them, so Nathan just set them on the nearest table, right on top of someone's half-eaten wedding cake. "Your daughter was kind enough to provide a recording that corroborates the financial discrepancies. In it, you admit to hiding assets, you admit to manipulating the settlement, and you admit to deliberately destroying your ex-wife's reputation with false allegations of infidelity." Nathan turned to face the room, addressing everyone now. "For those of you who heard Robert's version of events 14 years ago, who believed he was the victim in his divorce, I want you to know the truth. Karen Mitchell never cheated. She never lied. She left an emotionally abusive marriage with a 14-year-old daughter and $40,000. Meanwhile, Robert kept a house worth $400,000, rental properties worth another $600,000, and a business valued at over $1 million. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shocked voices, angry voices. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be all over social media, and my father knew it. "This is ridiculous," my father said, but his voice cracked. "This is my daughter's wedding. You can't—" "I absolutely can," Nathan said smoothly. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document. "This is a motion to reopen your divorce case based on evidence of financial fraud. You'll be served officially on Monday morning, but I thought you might want a preview." He held out the papers. My father didn't take them, so Nathan just set them on the nearest table, right on top of someone's half-eaten wedding cake. "Your daughter was kind enough to provide a recording that corroborates the financial discrepancies. In it, you admit to hiding assets, you admit to manipulating the settlement, and you admit to deliberately destroying your ex-wife's reputation with false allegations of infidelity." Nathan turned to face the room, addressing everyone now. "For those of you who heard Robert's version of events 14 years ago, who believed he was the victim in his divorce, I want you to know the truth. Karen Mitchell never cheated. She never lied. She left an emotionally abusive marriage with a 14-year-old daughter and $40,000. Meanwhile, Robert kept a house worth $400,000, rental properties worth another $600,000, and a business valued at over $1 million. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shocked voices, angry voices. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be all over social media, and my father knew it. "This is ridiculous," my father said, but his voice cracked. "This is my daughter's wedding. You can't—" "I absolutely can," Nathan said smoothly. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document. "This is a motion to reopen your divorce case based on evidence of financial fraud. You'll be served officially on Monday morning, but I thought you might want a preview." He held out the papers. My father didn't take them, so Nathan just set them on the nearest table, right on top of someone's half-eaten wedding cake. Your daughter was kind enough to provide a recording that corroborates the financial discrepancies. In it, you admit to hiding assets, you admit to manipulating the settlement, and you admit to deliberately destroying your ex-wife's reputation with false allegations of infidelity. Nathan turned to face the room, addressing everyone now. For those of you who heard Robert's version of events 14 years ago, who believed he was the victim in his divorce, I want you to know the truth. Karen Mitchell never cheated. She never lied. She left an emotionally abusive marriage with a 14-year-old daughter and $40,000. Meanwhile, Robert kept a house worth $400,000, rental properties worth another $600,000, and a business valued at over $1 million. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shocked voices, angry voices. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be all over social media, and my father knew it. "This is ridiculous," my father said, but his voice cracked. "This is my daughter's wedding. You can't." "I absolutely can," Nathan said smoothly. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document. "This is a motion to reopen your divorce case based on evidence of financial fraud. You'll be served officially on Monday morning, but I thought you might want a preview." He held out the papers. My father didn't take them, so Nathan just set them on the nearest table, right on top of someone's half-eaten wedding cake. Your daughter was kind enough to provide a recording that corroborates the financial discrepancies. In it, you admit to hiding assets, you admit to manipulating the settlement, and you admit to deliberately destroying your... The Monday after my wedding, I went back to teaching like nothing had happened, except everything had happened. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since Saturday night. Text messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, Facebook friend requests from people at the wedding, voicemails from my father's side of the family, some apologetic, some angry, all of them wanting to be part of the story now that the truth was out. I ignored most of them. I had lesson plans to write and essays to grade and a normal life to return to. But the world didn't let me return to normal that easily. The video started circulating on Tuesday. Someone at the wedding had recorded the whole thing on their phone. My father's speech, the recording playing over the speakers, Nathan walking up with the manila envelope, everything. It went viral, not just locally, but nationally. By Wednesday morning, I had 3 voicemails from producers asking if I wanted to appear on talk shows. By Thursday, there was an article in the local newspaper with the headline, "Wedding Reception Becomes Court of Public Opinion." I didn't respond to any of it. Neither did my mother. We'd said what we needed to say. The truth was out there. That was enough. But Nathan's legal case, that moved forward with the precision of a freight train. Daniel would come home from the firm and give me updates. My father had hired a new lawyer, an expensive one from 2 cities over. They were trying to fight the motion to reopen the divorce case, claiming the recording was obtained illegally, claiming the financial documents were circumstantial. Nathan demolished every argument. The recording was legal because I was a party to the conversation. The financial documents were public record, just hidden behind shell companies in creative accounting. Everything Nathan had found was admissible, provable, and damning. 6 weeks after my wedding, my father's lawyer called Nathan with a settlement offer. My mother was at our apartment when Daniel brought the news. We had invited her over for dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad at our small dining table. When Daniel walked in with that look on his face, we both knew something had shifted. "Karen," said Daniel, sitting down across from my mother, "Robert's attorney wants to settle. They're offering to pay the difference between what you should have received and what you actually got, plus interest. It's a substantial amount." My mother's hand shook slightly as she set down her fork. "How much?" $325,000. The room went completely silent. My mother just stared at Daniel like he'd spoken a different language. 300, she couldn't finish the sentence. Plus a public retraction. Nathan had insisted on that part, Daniel explained. He has to send a letter to everyone he told lies to, the church, the family, the golf club, everyone, admitting he lied about you having an affair, admitting he manipulated the divorce settlement. My mother started crying. Not sad crying, something else, something that looked like 14 years of weight lifting off her shoulders all at once. "I don't want his money," she said quietly. "I just wanted people to know I didn't do what he said I did. I just wanted my name back." "You'll get both," I said, taking her hand. "Take the money, Mom. You earned it. 14 years of raising me alone, 14 years of night shifts and one-bedroom apartments. You earned every penny." She looked at me with those tired eyes that had seen too much, survived too much. "What do I do with that kind of money, Gracie?" "Whatever you want," I said. "For the first time in 14 years, you do exactly what you want." The settlement was finalized 8 weeks after my wedding. The money was transferred into my mother's account on a Thursday afternoon, $325,000, plus another $15,000 Nathan had negotiated for emotional distress. My mother called me from her bank parking lot, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "I don't know what to do," she kept saying. "I don't know what to do." "Breathe," I told her. "Just breathe, Mom. We'll figure it out together." The letters went out a week later, my father's public retraction, typed, formal, probably written by his lawyer but signed by him. "I deeply regret the false statements I made regarding Karen Mitchell during and after our divorce. She did not have an extramarital affair. She did not manipulate or deceive me. I allowed my anger to create a narrative that was untrue and harmful. I apologize for the damage I caused to her reputation." It was posted in the church bulletin. It was sent to every family member. It was even printed in the community newsletter of his neighborhood. My mother framed hers, not because she was proud of it, but because she said she needed to see it on bad days, needed proof that the truth had finally caught up to the lies. The responses from my father's side of the family were complicated. Some people apologized. Real apologies, the kind that acknowledged the pain they'd caused by believing him without question. Aunt Linda called and cried on the phone for 20 minutes, saying she should have reached out sooner, should have questioned his story, should have been there for us. Undisturbed. Others doubled down. Uncle Tim sent an email saying we'd humiliated the family, that airing private matters at a wedding was classless and cruel, that my father was still their brother no matter what mistakes he'd made. I didn't respond to that email. Neither did my mother. Some people will defend the villain forever because admitting they backed the wrong person means admitting they were wrong. And for some people, that's impossible. But the people who mattered, they showed up. My grandmother, Maggie, who had been living off Social Security and a small pension, who'd slipped 20s into my coat pocket when I wasn't looking, who'd driven over with groceries she probably couldn't afford. My mother's first purchase with the settlement money was a new car for Maggie, a safe, reliable sedan with all the modern safety features. Maggie cried when she saw it. "Karen, this is too much." "It's 14 years too late," my mother said. My mother kept working. That surprised some people. They thought she'd quit, retire, live off the settlement. But she didn't. She went back to her shifts at St. David's Memorial like always. "I'm not working because I need the money anymore," she explained to me one night. "I'm working because I'm good at it, because my patients need me, because I didn't spend all those years becoming a nurse just to walk away when things got easier." But she did make some changes. She moved out of the one-bedroom apartment off Route 9. She bought a small house, nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom ranch with a yard and good light. She invited Maggie to move in with her. "I spent 14 years surviving," she told me, standing in her new kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows. "Maybe it's time I learn how to live." And my father? He disappeared. Not literally. He still lived in that 4-bedroom house. He still went to the country club, though I heard his golf buddies stopped inviting him to tournaments. He still went to church, though he sat in the back now instead of the third pew where his family used to sit. But he disappeared from my life, completely. No calls, no texts, no attempts at reconciliation or explanation. Part of me thought he might reach out after the settlement was finalized, might try to apologize, might try to rebuild some kind of relationship. He never did. And honestly, I was okay with that, because I'd learned something important, something that took me 14 years and one very public wedding reception to understand. You can't force someone to see you. You can't make someone acknowledge the harm they've caused. You can't wait forever for an apology that's never coming. All you can do is tell the truth, protect the people who protected you, and build a life so full of love and purpose that the people who walked away become footnotes instead of chapters. My father wanted to call me a gold digger? Fine, let him. But the gold I found wasn't in Daniel's bank account or his law degree. It was in my mother's resilience, in my grandmother's unwavering support, in the family we built from nothing when the family we were born into fell apart. That's the kind of gold that matters, the kind you can't hide in offshore accounts or manipulate on a balance sheet, the kind that shows up at hospital bedsides and kitchen counters and one-bedroom apartments with dripping faucets.
3 months after the settlement, my mother did something I never expected. She went back to school. Not just any school, she enrolled in a nurse practitioner program, something she'd talked about for years but always dismissed as too expensive, too time-consuming, too late in life. "I'm 48 years old," she said when she told me. "Is that crazy?" "Mom, you went back to nursing school with a 2-year-old at home. You worked night shifts while raising me alone. You survived 14 years of being called a liar by someone who was supposed to love you. Going back to school at 48? That's not crazy. That's just Tuesday for you." She laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard enough of growing up. The program was 18 months, mostly online with some in-person clinical rotations. She studied at her kitchen table, the one in her new house with the good light. Sometimes I'd come over and find her surrounded by textbooks and notes, reading glasses perched on her nose, looking more alive than I'd seen her in years. "You know what's wild?" she said one evening while I was helping her practice physical assessment skills. "I'm not doing this because I have to anymore. I'm doing it because I want to. That's a new feeling." It was new for both of us. For 14 years, every decision had been about survival. Which shift paid more, which apartment was cheapest, which grocery store had the best deals. We'd been in survival mode for so long that actually choosing things based on what we wanted instead of what we needed felt almost foreign. Daniel and I settled into married life in our small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place not far from my school. We were both still working, both still building our careers. The money from Daniel's law firm was decent, but we weren't wealthy. We weren't the rich power couple my father had imagined when he called me a gold digger. We were just normal, and honestly, that was perfect. My grandmother Maggie thrived in my mother's new house. She had her own bedroom, her own space, but she was never alone. She planted a garden in the backyard, tomatoes and peppers and herbs. She made dinner most nights, insisting she needed to stay useful. "I'm 80 years old," she'd say. "The day I stop cooking is the day you can start worrying about me." Every Sunday, we'd gather at that house. Me, Daniel, my mother, Maggie. Sometimes Nathan would join us. He and Daniel had become genuine friends during the case, and Maggie had adopted him as another grandson. Those Sunday dinners became sacred. Pot roast and green beans and rolls from scratch, stories and laughter, and the kind of comfortable silence that only comes with family. Real family, the kind you choose and the kind that chooses you back. The news about my father trickled in through Aunt Linda. She was the only one from his side who'd maintained contact with us. She'd call my mother every few weeks, never pushing for reconciliation, just sharing updates because she thought we had a right to know. "He's dating someone new," she told us once. "Another young woman, mid-30s, works in marketing, I think." My mother just nodded. "I hope she's smarter than I was." "He asked for you, you know," Linda said quietly. "Both of you. He won't reach out directly, but he asks how you're doing." "What do you tell him?" I asked. Linda smiled. "I tell him you're thriving. I tell him Karen went back to school. I tell him you're married to a good man who treats you the way his son should have treated his wife. And then I watch him sit with that information." It wasn't forgiveness what Linda was doing. It was accountability. She was making sure my father had to face what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away, what he'd destroyed with his own hands. At school, things shifted too. The viral video had made its way to my students, of course. High schoolers are like bloodhounds for drama, and their teacher's wedding reception becoming a public spectacle was prime gossip material. But instead of it being a problem, something unexpected happened. More students started coming to me, girls mostly, girls with difficult home situations, girls with parents who didn't believe them, girls who felt invisible in their own families. They'd stay after class or come during lunch period, and they'd talk, not always about anything specific, just talk, like they needed to be seen by someone who understood what it felt like to be dismissed. One girl, Jasmine, a junior, with dark circles under her eyes and a GPA that didn't reflect how actually smart she was, came to my classroom one afternoon and said, "Miss Mitchell, Mrs. Reed, sorry, I don't know what to call you now." "Grace is fine," I said. She nodded. "I saw the video of your wedding, and I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't make you the bad guy, even if people tell you it does." I had to turn away for a second because I was going to cry. This 16-year-old girl, carrying her own weight of family trauma, thanking me for having a public confrontation at my wedding reception. "Jasmine," I said when I could trust my voice, "you're going to be okay. I don't know when and I don't know how, but you're going to be okay." She nodded, and then she said something that broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. "Did your dad ever apologize?" "No," I said honestly, "he never did." "But you're still okay?" "Yeah, I'm still okay, because I stopped waiting for his apology and started building a life that didn't need it." She thought about that for a moment. Then she picked up her backpack and headed for the door. Before she left, she turned back. "That recording you played, how long did you wait to use it?" 11 months. That's a long time to carry something like that." "Yeah," I agreed, "but it was worth it. Not because of what it did to him, but because of what it did for my mom and for me." Jasmine nodded slowly. "I'm going to remember that." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the empty classroom, thinking about all the Jasmines out there, all the kids growing up in homes where they're called ungrateful, where they're made to feel small, where they're waiting for apologies that will never come. I couldn't save them all. I couldn't fix their families or rewrite their histories, but I could show them what it looked like to survive, to stand up, to choose yourself when nobody will. 6 months after the wedding, Daniel came home with news. He'd been offered a partnership track at the firm, more responsibility, better salary, a real future in family law. "I want to specialize in cases like your mom's," Daniel said, "people who get railroaded in divorce proceedings because they can't afford good representation. Nathan's been teaching me everything. There's so many people out there who need help." I looked at this man I had married, this man my father had assumed I'd chosen for his money, and I felt overwhelmed with love. "You know the irony?" I said. "My dad called me a gold digger for marrying a lawyer, but you're using your law degree to help people like my mom, people he tried to destroy." Daniel smiled. "Best revenge is living well and helping others do the same." 6 months after the wedding, my mother passed her nurse practitioner certification exam on her second attempt. She called me from the parking lot of the testing center, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. "I did it, G. Gracie. I actually did it." Her starting salary in the new role was almost double what she'd made as a staff nurse. Not wealthy, but stable, comfortable, the kind of comfortable where you don't have to check your bank account before buying groceries. "You know what I'm going to do first?" she asked. "What?" "I'm going to take you, Daniel, and Maggie out to dinner, somewhere nice, somewhere with cloth and napkins, and I'm not going to look at the prices on the menu." We went to a steakhouse downtown, the kind of place my mother would have walked past 14 years ago without even considering going inside. We ordered appetizers and dessert, we got the good wine, Maggie got an extra side of mashed potatoes because she wanted them, and when the check came, my mother paid it without flinching. That night, sitting in that restaurant with my family, I thought about my father sitting alone in his big house. I thought about how he'd called us gold diggers, how he tried to make everyone believe we were opportunists and liars, and I realized he was right about something. We did find gold, just not the kind he meant. We found it in each other, in resilience, in Sunday dinners and kitchen counter homework sessions, and nurse practitioners' study groups, in the kind of wealth that can't be hidden in shell companies or manipulated on financial statements, the kind of wealth that actually matters.
A year after my wedding, something unexpected happened. My father reached out, not to me, not to my mother, but to Aunt Linda, asking if she thought there was any chance of reconciliation, any possibility that maybe, someday, we could sit down and talk. Linda called my mother to ask what she thought. We were at Sunday dinner when she brought it up, the four of us, plus Nathan, who'd become a permanent fixture at our table. Maggie was serving pot roast, Daniel was already on his second roll. Everything was normal until Linda's name appeared on my mother's phone. My mother stepped into the kitchen to take the call. We could hear her side of the conversation through the doorway. "He wants what?" "I see. No, Linda, I appreciate you asking, but no, it's not about being angry anymore. It's about being done."
When she came back to the table, she looked tired. Not the exhausted from a double shift tired I remembered from my childhood, a different kind of tired, the emotional kind. Your father wants to talk, she said to me. Linda says he's been going to therapy, says he's working on himself, says he wants to apologize. The table went quiet. Even Maggie stopped passing the green beans. What did she tell her? I asked. My mother sat down slowly. She looked at her plate, then at me, then at Daniel, then at Maggie. When she came back to the table, she looked tired. Not the exhausted from a double shift tired I remembered from my childhood, a different kind of tired, the emotional kind. Your father wants to talk, she said to me. Linda says he's been going to therapy, says he's working on himself, says he wants to apologize. The table went quiet. Even Maggie stopped passing the green beans. What did she tell her? I asked. My mother sat down slowly. She looked at her plate, then at me, then at Daniel, then at Maggie. I told her the truth, that I spent 14 years waiting for that apology, 14 years wondering if maybe I had done something wrong, if maybe I'd misremembered, if maybe I deserved what he did to me. And then Grace played that recording at her wedding, and I heard his own words, his own voice admitting to everything. And I realized something. She paused. Her hands were steady now, steadier than I'd ever seen them. I realized I don't need his apology anymore. I don't need his validation. I don't need him to tell me I was a good wife or that I didn't deserve what he did to me, because I already know those things, and knowing them myself is enough. Maggie reached over and squeezed my mother's hand. That's my girl, she said quietly. Daniel looked at me. What about you? Do you want to talk to him? I thought about it, really thought about it. Part of me, that 14-year-old girl who'd been called ungrateful, wanted to hear him say he was sorry, wanted to hear him admit he was wrong. But the 29-year-old woman sitting at this table, surrounded by people who actually loved her, she didn't need it either. No, I said. I'm good. You sure? Nathan asked. Because if you ever change your mind, I can facilitate that conversation, make sure it's on your terms, in a neutral space with clear boundaries. I smiled at him. I know, and I appreciate that. But honestly, I've spent enough of my life in rooms with him hoping he'd see me differently. I'm done hoping for things from people who've proven they're incapable of giving them. We went back to dinner. The pot roast was perfect, the rolls were warm, and nobody mentioned my father again that night. But later, lying in bed next to Daniel, I thought about what my mother had said, about not needing the apology anymore, about knowing the truth being enough. Do you think that makes us cold, not wanting to reconcile with him? I asked Daniel in the darkness. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that stayed with me ever since. Grace, forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into your life. It doesn't mean pretending the harm didn't happen. It doesn't even mean you have to feel warm, fuzzy feelings toward them. Sometimes forgiveness just means you stop letting what they did control your story. You and your mom, you're not cold, you're free. Free. That was the exact right word. Over the next few months, I started noticing something. The students who'd come to me after seeing the wedding video, girls like Jasmine, who needed to know it was possible to stand up for yourself, they started changing. Jasmine's grades improved. She started applying to colleges. She came to me one day with an acceptance letter to a state school with a partial scholarship and said, "I did it. I'm getting out." Another girl, Maria, reported her emotionally abusive stepfather to a school counselor. It led to family therapy, to protective orders, to real change in her home. A boy named Marcus, quiet kid in the back row, wrote an essay about his own father leaving and how he'd blamed himself for years. He turned it in with a note, "This story helped me write mine." I wasn't trying to be an inspiration. I was just trying to live my life. But apparently, living your life honestly, standing up for yourself publicly, refusing to shrink to make other people comfortable, apparently that inspires people. Who knew? My mother finished her first year as a nurse practitioner. She was good at it, really good. Patients requested her specifically. Other nurses came to her with questions. She was thriving in a way I never seen before. You know what's funny? She said one day when we were having coffee at her house. All those years, I thought I was just surviving, just getting through, but I was actually building something: skills, resilience, self-reliance. I didn't know it at the time, but I was becoming the person I needed to be. Maggie, now 81, still made Sunday dinner every week. She moved a little slower, her hands were more arthritic, but she refused to stop. "The day I can't cook for my family is the day they can put me in a home," she'd say. And then she'd add, "But y'all better make sure it's a nice one with good food, because I know quality when I taste it." Nathan still came to dinners. He'd started dating someone, a woman named Patricia, who was a social worker. She fit right in with our strange little chosen family. She and Maggie would argue about the proper way to make cornbread, both of them enjoying the argument more than they'd ever admit. These were the people at my table now, not the family I was born into, but the family I built, the family that showed up, the family that chose me and let me choose them back. One Sunday, about 18 months after the wedding, we were all sitting around the table when Maggie suddenly got quiet. She looked around at all of us with this expression I couldn't quite read. "What?" my mother asked. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Maggie said. Her eyes were misty. "I'm just thinking about how it used to be. That apartment off Route 9, Grace doing homework at the counter, you working yourself to death just to keep the lights on, and now look at us." She gestured around the table, at the full house, at the people who'd become family, at the life we built from almost nothing. "This," she said quietly, "this is what winning looks like." She was right. This was winning, not the money from the settlement, though that helped, not the public vindication, though that mattered, not even the fact that my father had been exposed and held accountable. This was winning. This table, these people, this chosen family that showed up every Sunday without fail, this house that my mother bought with her own money, earned through her own work, chosen because she wanted it, not because it was all she could afford. This was the gold we'd been digging for all along. We just didn't know it. Linda still called occasionally with updates about my father. He was still in therapy. He'd apparently broken up with the marketing woman. He'd asked Linda more than once if we'd reconsidered talking to him. "What should I tell him?" Linda asked. "Tell him we're doing well. Tell him we're happy. Tell him we've moved on. And tell him that's not a punishment, it's just the truth." Because that was the truth. We had moved on, not in the bitter, spiteful way where you pretend to be happy just to make someone else feel bad, but in the real, genuine way where you wake up in the morning and the first thought in your head isn't about the person who hurt you. We'd built lives so full of love and purpose and meaning that the people who walked away became footnotes instead of chapters. My father thought he was calling me out at my wedding, thought he was exposing me as a gold digger, a manipulator, someone just like my mother. He was right about one thing. I am just like my mother. I'm resilient. I'm resourceful. I know how to survive if survival seems impossible. I know how to build something beautiful out of broken pieces. I know how to work for what I have and appreciate it once I get it. And yeah, I found gold, just not in the places he was looking. If you're watching this and you have someone in your life who makes you feel small, who calls you names, who rewrites history to make themselves the hero and you the villain, I can't tell you what to do. Every situation is different. Every family is different. But I can tell you this: you don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your DNA. You don't owe them unlimited chances to hurt you. You don't owe them your peace, your sanity, your self-respect. And if you choose to walk away, if you choose to build a life without them, that doesn't make you cold. That doesn't make you ungrateful. That makes you free.